Okay, we're going to call this workshop together. Welcome to the City of Montclair's City Council special meeting. And in terms of roll call, I believe Councilmember Lopez will not be here today, City Clerk. Okay, so we have 4 council members present. And now we have public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council regarding the special meeting of the council. We have members of the public who wish to address the City Council. Doesn't look like anybody's angry in the audience, so we'll move on. It's supposed to be a joke, it's supposed to laugh. Come on, guys. All right. Okay, so we'll go down to the presentation, and this is the 26-27 presentation of the City of Montclair's Housing Corporation budget. All right, who's leading off?
Get started. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City staff, and members of the audience, which are also city staff. I'm here tonight to present the fiscal year 2026-27 preliminary budget review. We'll start with the overview and budget process. This evening's budget workshop provides an overview of the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 annual budget for the City of Montclair, with focused discussion on the following topics: overview and budget process, producing a balanced budget, revenue and appropriations, unassigned and special purpose reserve funds, personnel services, general fund special purpose funds, bonds and debt service, and our conclusion. The 5-month annual budget development process includes the following significant steps. Finance Department staff develop and refine revenue projections. Finance Department staff, in conjunction with departments, forecast personnel requirements. Department heads and their staff are provided with prior year amounts and formats for budgeting annual budget requests. Departments prepare their budget requests for appropriations. City manager and finance department meet with department heads and staff to evaluate, modify, and finalize department level requests. The proposed annual budget document is submitted for City Council review and consideration. Producing a balanced budget. The annual and primary goal related to budget preparation. Produce an operating budget where revenues equal or exceed appropriations and programs and services are adequately funded to meet community and organizational needs and requirements. The fiscal year 2026 budget, as presented, has a net deficiency of general fund revenues over general fund appropriations in the amount of $631,544. This deficiency in general fund revenues is driven largely by 1, a lethargic national economy with inflation demonstrating a progressive rise, 2, federal economic, domestic, and foreign policies, including tariffs, immigration enforcement activities, and military incursions, together suppressing global economic activity, 3, suppress local economic activity, and 4, a decline in consumer confidence due to the increasing costs of goods and services. The deficiency in general fund revenue over general fund appropriations is projected to reduce the general fund unassigned reserve to $5.46 million at end of year. At $5.46 million, the general fund unassigned reserve represents approximately 13.14% of the general fund operating appropriations, which is less than the City Council's unassigned reserve ratio goal of 25%. Now we'll discuss revenues for the next fiscal year. So this table 1 shows the current year, our estimated revenue, all funds, $73,117,557. Revised prior years, just over $70 million. This is a change of just over $3 million. And that change is basically due to about $2 million in grant funding to potentially purchase a fire truck. General fund operating fund, current year for $40.9 million, revised prior year $40.4 million, so a slight increase of $553,000. Significant revenue components, general fund, $32.6 million in combined property sales and use and transactions and use taxes. This amount includes the following estimates: just over $15 million in Bradley Burns sales tax, $10.9 million in transaction and use tax revenue related to Measure L, $2.7 million in transaction and use tax revenue related to Measure F, and $3.86 million in property tax revenue. Of the above totals, the following amounts are allocated for debt service as indicated. Debt service on bonds, $2.59 million for the 2014 lease revenue bond, $2.39 million for the 2021 lease revenue bond, and $4.4 million for the 2021 pension obligation bond. Other fiscal year 2026-27 general fund revenue adjustments, $210,880 increase in taxes other than property, sales, and transaction and use taxes. Overall, sales and transactions and use taxes are projected to show very minimal year-over-year increases. $80,000 decrease in licenses and permits due primarily to an expected decrease in the issuance of building permits. $34,600 increase in fines and forfeitures due primarily to an increase in parking citations. $8,500 increase in charges for services due primarily to an increase in reimbursed program costs. A $12,200 decrease in miscellaneous revenue due primarily to a decrease in reimbursed expenditures. For all other funds, a $79,257 increase in the Section 2032 Road Maintenance Rehabilitation Fund due primarily to an increase in gas prices. $95,000 increase in the Traffic Safety Fund due primarily to an increase in parking citations. $200,000 decrease in the Park Development Fund due primarily to a current decline in proposed new housing development in the city. $29,445 increase in the Public Safety Fund due primarily to an increase in gas prices. $388,473 increase in the After School Program Fund due primarily to assist in covering higher costs. $125,000 increase in the Economic Development Agency Assets Fund due primarily to an increase in Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund property taxes. A $550,000 increase in the Sewer Operating Fund due primarily to an increase in sewer fees. So now we'll talk a little bit about our projected deficit. The fiscal year 2026-27 budget presently has a projected general fund operating deficit of $631,544. Montclair's heavy reliance on sales tax and transaction and use tax revenue have contributed to this projected deficit. Montclair is not alone in confronting projected declines in revenue and general fund deficits. Other neighboring cities include, but are not limited to, the following: Pomona, an $11.4 million deficit; Upland, a $5.69 million deficit; Chino Hills, a $4.3 million deficit; Loma Linda, an $847,100 deficit, which may be worse due to the June 2nd, 2026 loss of a 1% tax measure; and Redlands, a $2.7 million revenue decline. Depressed growth in general fund tax projections for fiscal year 2026-27 is based on, but not limited to, the following areas of concern. National factors. Revenue estimates are largely impacted by a national economic environment that presents significant challenges. A lethargic national economy with a progressive rising inflation, declining consumer confidence, recurring swings in tariff policies, rising fuel and energy prices, a growing economic gap defined by a K-shaped economy, fluctuations and uncertainty in the housing market, growing concerns related to affordable health care coverage, homelessness, immigration enforcement activities, and other social issues, economic uncertainty restricting the Federal Reserve's ability to lower the federal funds rate. The California factors. The state's economic cycles are shaped by growth and downturns that are more volatile than what is experienced by many other states. Heavy reliance on a few key industries, progressive tax structure, boom and bust budget cycles, external economic shocks, demographics and labor market shifts, political and policy factors. For fiscal year 2026-27, California's Legislative Analyst's Office has projected an almost $18 billion shortfall. Montclair regional factors. Drawing on fourth quarter 2025 and first quarter 2026 data from HDL companies, Sales tax trends demonstrate limited improvement in sales tax revenues heading into fiscal year 2026-27. Consumer spending. Consumers are holding back or focusing on essentials and value. Declining, slow growth in tax revenue sources. Montclair sales and transactions and use tax measures are showing minimal year-over-year growth. E-commerce versus brick and mortar. Retail growth continues in online fulfillment centers, which decreases sales and transactions and use taxes collected by the city.
We'll stop right there for a second. Any questions on the revenue side so far by council? Any questions right now?
Oh, I know, lots of questions.
Yeah, on the revenue side?
On the what?
The revenue, what we
Yeah.
just talked about. Want to start with revenue? Go for it.
I have a quick question if you need a second.
Go ahead.
What was last year's general fund revenue, if you can recall? Oh, thank you.
Yep, 40.4 million.
Missed that, thank you.
Yeah.
On slide 8, we're talking about current year, revised prior year, and change. I know we talk about being in a $631,000 deficit, so it just seems odd that we would be increasing our next year by here it says 3033 million, but in the book that we were given, my calculations are more like 4.5 million in what I see. I'm just wondering why we're increasing if we're in a deficit. And that's one of my questions on that side of it. And then on the lease revenue bonds, I have a question regarding what our debt service that we pay back. Is that a fixed rate or is that an adjustable?
Yeah, the lease revenues are on the, later on the agenda, so let's we can look at that later on if you want to, on the lease revenue bond.
Yeah,
Oh.
there's,
Let's focus
it's
on
mentioned a
slide
few,
8.
it's mentioned a few times in
Yeah.
the thing.
Well, there's a section on the revenue bonds, all that, so
Yeah.
we can get to that one there, but let's focus on slide 8 first.
So the 3 million change, that's over all funds. So that includes everything. And our deficit we're discussing is just in the general fund.
Okay, I understand. I'm just wondering why we're increasing if we're in a deficit. Why would we increase our budget?
You're asking why the funds are increasing? Because the revenues coming into other funds other than general fund are increasing.
I understand.
And those funds are used to operate other than general government operations.
Yes, I understand that. But my question is, if we're in a deficit and we're bringing in more revenue, do we have to spend it all or?
Okay, so general fund monies are used to operate general government operations, including personnel.
Yeah.
That's the burden of the general fund. Other funds are for specific activities, and most of that would be represented, for example, by grants that are used for infrastructure projects and other things that those funds are specifically designed for. We don't have control over those funds. They're specific for specific purposes. The general fund is for general government operations, which is 95% of our operations, and those funds are what we are experiencing a deficit in.
The funds that we're receiving.
General fund.
The general fund, that money that we receive from our general tax operations, property taxes, sales tax operations, transactions and use tax revenues, things like police department going out and issuing traffic citations, those monies all go into the general fund. And that fund, which operates the majority of our services to the community, including personnel expenditures, is what is experiencing the deficit.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand the funds that we're receiving and then the general operating fund. I guess I'm having difficulty understanding why if we're having a deficit, why we're increasing certain things. Why aren't we cutting back in areas? I'm not saying everything, but to prevent having the deficit.
We did cut back. We cut back $3.8 million from the requests that were submitted by the various departments. We also froze a number of positions that saved the budget about
Just a little over $1 million.
$1.3 million.
Yeah, I
And
saw
so-
that. I saw that in the budget, in your message and everything.
I think we're trying to do right now is focus on understand the revenue issues, because we'll talk about appropriations next.
Yeah.
Appropriations, we'll talk about expenditures, we'll talk about the positions are frozen. I guess the big, to me, when I look at the revenue, the big issue with revenue is our revenues are flat. Our sales tax revenues are flat, they're not growing to offset cost increases. And I think that's what staff's trying to say here. Am I correct?
Well, and revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, our revenues are flat.
Yes, revenues are flat, and even if they're up over previous years that were negative. So if, for example, if you were 6% negative 2 years ago and 3% negative the following year, and even if you're up 2% this year, you've only gained improvement on a negative of 8%. So you're still behind. You just are demonstrating moving forward. You're not going negative, but you're still not where you were at 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I understand that. And then the same with the reverse. If we had more money than we were expecting, then we'd be at a positive, correct?
Well, no, not necessarily, because you still have to make up the negative from previous years.
Okay, I'm talking, I guess, about Measure L. You know,
Yes.
Measure L, I know you put in the report that the first year we brought in 11 point something million. The next, few years it dropped, about $1 million, and then it's slowly going back up. And we talk about how that's not very much, but if you really go back to 2020, when we, wanted, and we put this on the ballot for the residents, what was our projected revenue at that time that we were thinking we were gonna get from it? It was $7 million. So technically, we're really $4 million more than what we were originally wanting, which is about 40%, rather than saying we're not, do you understand what I'm saying? I go back in history and I'm just trying to see where we are and what's going on with, all the funds, and that's why I was asking about.
Yeah, I understand, and projections versus actual results are
Yeah.
typically two different things. You hope and expect that you will generate more. Of course, at the time, we were coming out of COVID, so while we had actually anticipated that it would generate up to $11 million because of COVID, all of the advisors told us that we should lower that number and expect much less than that. And that is why we had projected that we would be somewhere between $7 and $8 million. The result obviously was better than the advisors had anticipated, but what we had actually anticipated it would be. It came in at $11 million, and I think if you go back and you look at all of the materials related to discussions at that time, staff was more positive than the consultants were and believed that it would generate that $11 million. It did. But again, that was over 5 years ago. And here we are now in 2026, 27, and the numbers now are less than what we earned 5 years ago. That's not positive growth. That's backward growth. And while we are moving back to that $11 million, it's 5 years ago that we came in at $11 million. Those numbers should be at $14 million if the economy was really progressing in a positive direction. It's not progressing in a positive direction. We're not at $14 million. We're still about $400,000 short of where we were in 2021, 2022.
I understand all of that, but I'll let you continue on.
Go ahead, Janet.
Okay. Okay, so now we will discuss appropriations. So table 2 shows the department request versus city manager recommended. So overall funds, the department's requests were $64.5 million. City manager approved a $60.6 million, so we were able to reduce the budgets by $3.9 million. For the general fund, department requests were $45.2 million. City manager approved $41.6 million, so our reductions were $3.6 million. City manager recommended amounts, the current year, $70,058,000. For the new fiscal year, this current year, we're at $65,230, so there's almost a $5 million jump right there over all funds, $4.8 million. And the general operating fund current year is, for the next fiscal year, 41.6. The current fiscal year, 39.5 million, so that's 2.1 million increase over the prior year. Personnel services, all funds 35.6 million, which is 58.9% of total appropriations, which is up from 34.4 million, which was 61.7% for fiscal year 2025-26. That was over all funds. General fund, 28.7 million, which is 69% of general fund appropriations, which is up from 27.2 million, which was 68.9% for fiscal year 2025-26. Personnel increases year to year are related to addition of grant-funded positions in the fire department, restoration of certain general fund positions in various departments following the COVID-19 pandemic, enhancing staff in key functional areas, succession planning, implementation of negotiated wage and benefit increases, and annual increases to CalPERS's unfunded accrued liabilities for employee pensions. Services and supplies, all funds, 21.6 million, which is 35.8% of total appropriations, up from 20.6 million, which was 37.1% for fiscal year 2025-26. For the general fund, 12.5 million, which is 30.2% of general fund appropriations, up from 11.9 million, which was 29.2% for fiscal year 2025-26. Capital outlay for fiscal year 26-27 is $3,244,114, of which $597,799 is being funded by the Equipment Replacement Fund. All major capital outlay requires authorization from the city manager before issuance of purchase order requests. So here's a listing for each department. For the Information Technology Department, $247,000 for computer equipment. Human Services, a total of $165,000 for 2 passenger vans, which we're getting through a grant, and MAP office furniture, which is the after-school program fund. Police Department, $194,400 for 3 patrol vehicles being paid out of the Equipment Replacement Fund, and dispatch console upgrade, which is the general fund. The Fire Department, $2,504,552 for a tractor-drawn aerial ladder truck, which will be paid out of the Equipment Replacement Fund and grants from San Bernardino County and Community Project Funding. Forcible Entry Training Props, general fund. LifePak 35 cardiac monitor, the general fund, and 5 LifePak CR2 defibrillators, general fund. And for the Public Works Department, $133,162 for a 2026 Chevrolet Silverado, which will be paid out of the Equipment Replacement Fund. Wenco Towable Aeroboard, Case 13-inch Trenching Bucket, R1234YF AC Machine, C-Tech Manufacturing Tool Drawer, all those paid out of the general fund. And out of the Sewer Fund, Sewer BMP Program, and 3 smart cover manhole lid systems. So this table shows all the allocations by department, and a change from the prior year is just over 4.3 million. There's only one fund transfer budgeted, and that is our annual $100,000 transfer from the Traffic Safety Fund for applicable programs to the general fund. So do you want me to stop here?
Why don't you keep on going?
Keep on going?
Yeah, we'll stop in a second. Keep on.
General fund operating fund balance, unassigned reserve. So here's our general fund operating fund balance and comparisons with operating appropriations. So at the end of fiscal year 26-27, We're estimating our operating fund balance will be 5.4 million, which is 13.14%, which is below the recommended 25%. Unassigned reserve balance. Government Finance Officers Association General Fund unassigned reserve ratio recommendation is minimum 25%, optimum 50%. City Council direction, maintain minimum unassigned reserve ratio of 25% of operating appropriations with a goal to achieve a 50% unassigned reserve ratio. Estimated June 30th, 2027 general operating funds fund balance estimate of approximately 5.4 million of the general fund unassigned reserve, which is less than the threshold target of 25% of operating appropriations. Estimated June 30th, 2027 general fund reserve fund equity representing reserves for special purposes is 25.3 million. Over the past 7 fiscal years, the reserve ratio has fluctuated with a low of 16.55% and a high of 24.95%. These fluctuations are generally the result of the following: a difference in operating appropriations between consecutive years, adjustments to the city's revenue profile, creation of the following debt service funds to achieve adequate funding for annual payments of the 2021 issue of lease revenue bonds debt service fund, 2021 issue of pension obligation bonds debt service fund, and the UAL POB amortization fund. Adjusting special purpose reserve funds as necessary and when surplus funding is available, establishing additional special purpose reserve funds to reflect changing requirements related to city operations, funding assigned to the Economic Development Agency for real property acquisition, end-of-year audit adjustments for actual revenues and expenditures, mid-year budget adjustments. City staff will continue working toward a fund balance ratio in the general operating funds unassigned reserves that represents no less than 25% of the general operating funds appropriations budget, with the long-term goal of achieving a 50% unassigned reserve ratio.
Okay, we can stop there for a second. So any questions on the appropriations right now or the unassigned reserves?
Not
These at this time? Okay, no questions then? Then we can continue on then?
Okay.
It's okay? All right.
Maintaining general funds fund balance and reserves. Maintaining a healthy general fund operating fund unassigned reserve fund balance. In recent years, the city's success at achieving and maintaining a healthy general fund operating fund unassigned reserve fund balance has been accomplished through commitment to the following coordinated objectives: fiscal restraint achieved by implementation of sound economic policies and practices, reviewing the shared allocation of personnel-related costs between the general operating fund, other city entities, and other city funds, maintaining an appropriate employee ratio, requiring employees to pay their respective share of the CalPERS member contribution, implementation of revenue enhancement measures. For fiscal year 2026-27, the following revenue enhancement measures are submitted for consideration. Measure L, this is an existing measure. Continue encouraging economic activity to improve general fund tax receipts. Community facilities districts, this is also an existing measure. Continue encouraging high-density residential development to improve CFD tax receipts in support of police and fire services, emergency equipment apparatus, and public works maintenance programs. Implementation of revenue enhancement measures continued. Commercial cannabis businesses. In fiscal year 2026-27, City Council will be asked to consider adoption of a revenue-raising ordinance which could generate $2 million in general fund revenue. The proposed tax rate is 7%, authorized by voters in the November 2022 general municipal election. Cost of personal choice services study implementation. On May 4th, 2026, a workshop was conducted related to assessed fees for personal choice services that are offered to customers and that can be withheld for non-payment, may be likened to user fees. City Council adoption of the recommendations contained in the cost of services study can potentially generate $760,000 annually. Utility users tax. Adjustment to the voter authorized rate of 4.74% could generate approximately $600,000 in new general fund revenue. Utility users tax. Consider 2028 voter amendment to include cable streaming services and/or other utilities, for example, refuse and sewer, not currently provided for in the UUT ordinance, may generate in excess of $800,000 annually in general fund revenue. E-commerce, continue working with legislators to amend California's current tax code related to point of sale. Alternatively, consider working with special legal counsel to pursue a class action lawsuit to require cities with point of sale agreements, sales tax sharing agreements with online in-state retailers to amend those agreements to favor a point of delivery reporting scheme, or report all online in-state transactions and use tax receipts received through tax sharing agreements to their respective county pools for distribution to agencies based on per agency brick and mortar per capita sales tax performance. Potential to generate $2 million annually in online transactions and use tax revenue. Monte Vista Fire Protection District, pursue cost reimbursement for fire service in the city's sphere of influence. Current and prospective annual payments are estimated at approximately $760,000. Montclair potentially entitled to retroactive service costs to be determined. The A line, formerly the Gold Line, litigation. Continue pursuing current claims and litigation against the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority regarding extension of light rail to the Montclair Transit Center. Economic recovery undetermined, however, could significantly exceed $1 billion based on Beacon Economic Study related to loss in economic output and annual tax revenues. Commercial use of the former Pep Boys building site. Evaluate conversion of the former Pep Boys into a commercial use that could potentially generate up to $30,000 to $50,000 monthly in lease revenue payments. The I-10 freeway adjacent electronic messaging sign. Potential for 2 sites along the I-10 freeway corridor. Installation of electronic messaging signs could generate an estimated $100,000 to $500,000 annually in leasing advertisement revenue for the general fund. Opportunity zone designation. This designation in the North Montclair Census District would allow for infusion of investment capital in North Montclair, which could be in excess of $7 billion.
Okay, any questions on this section of general operating fund balance revenue? Maybe I'll lead off. I know that if you go to slide 31, I just want to pinpoint to my colleagues, these are potential new revenues that the city can attempt to capture. These are obviously forecast revenue, but one is the cannabis business. We had a workshop on that 2 weeks ago, and I believe it's essential that this council have a strong consideration of the cannabis business ordinance later this year. And I think staff did receive directions at the last workshop, and then obviously this is expected to come back to us. The other thing here is this cost of personnel choices service studies. We also had a workshop on this, projected to generate $760,000 annually, and this will also come back to the city council at a regular meeting for us to consider this. But this is also new revenue. This is new revenue. This is not in the proposed budget.
Correct.
So if we were to adopt this, this could potentially be new revenue coming in for us. The other thing here is, the utility usage tax. When this was first adopted back in 1992, was 5%. It was 5%. That was the voter approved utility usage tax, and then the council at the time had a plan to reduce it based on sales tax dollars increases. So we have a potential to look into this. I think if, depending on where the budget is, the second half of the fiscal year or the first half of 27, that we should also look at this, maybe our mid-year budget review, and consider if the utility usage tax should be adjusted. This is another one, utility usage tax. I don't quite understand the whole cable streaming services, but if, this is something that if the council wants to put this place on the ballot in 28, I'm not advocating to do right now, but it is something for us to consider at a future date. If we go to number 32, This is a big issue. I don't know if you have any questions about it, but obviously e-commerce and in these tax sharing agreements, some of the jurisdictions are doing. I know there's some legislation. The League of California Cities has also been involved to try to make it more equitable. There's no leeways, but obviously brick and mortars, which we're a brick and mortar city, is being impacted by the e-commerce or the big warehouses that are point of sale. So, and then, of course, the Monte Vista Fire Protection District, this is something also the staff's worked on, identified that this revenue of $760,000 that we were never getting. I know, Ed, I believe we have communication with the county on this now, but this is also potentially new revenue for the city of Montclair's general fund. So I'll stop there and see if any more questions. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Yeah, I was just curious, does the GFOA's unassigned reserve ratio recommendation have any bearing on like insurance or
No,
nothing like that? It's just a recommendation?
just recommendation, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Councilmember Rue.
I will start with a question, and I have some others in here, but some of them can wait. Personal services, or personal choice for services, how would that work?
Well, these are effectively similar to what user fees are, where if somebody requests a service specific from the city that is separate from general services provided to the community, they would be obligated to pay for those services.
What would that service be?
Yes. Oh, what would the service be? Oh, for example, if they're doing a development and they need specific services from the city related to their development project, the community would not be responsible for paying for the city providing that service to them. The individual themselves would be responsible for paying for that service.
Well, we already have developer fees that developers pay.
Yes, I'm only using that as an example, but
But
that
what would
is
an example be to an average resident?
a resident who would come in, for example, who would want solar panels on their roof. That is not a service that the city would provide and charge to the residents generally. That would be charged specifically to the individual.
So what would using solar panels, what would that fee be? A fee to install them? We don't install solar panels anyway. They hire somebody to do
No,
it.
but it's a processing fee that the city applies for permits and other inspection services and things that would be required from the city. So there are only services directed to individuals who are requesting that the city provide services beyond what is normally provided to the community.
That would not include police and fire, would it?
No, this is not inclusive of that.
Just point of order, we discussed this at the
I
workshop.
know, I'm just trying
Oh, okay.
to get my head around all
Had a
this.
big document relating to the fee study that was done.
Right, no, and then we're talking about the utility users tax and increasing that. My concern is what it means to, one, businesses in town, not large businesses, or very small businesses who are very dependent on electricity, for example, and natural gas. Those rates are going up all the time. These businesses are in many cases marginal. An increase in this tax could result in that business simply saying, I can't be here anymore, I've got to close my doors. And I hope we look at that very carefully. It would mean a lot to residents who are struggling to make ends meet right now. All utility costs are high, very high. Nobody can tell me they're not. And if we do this, many residents may have to make a choice on the utility, on when they use what time of day they use electricity, when they use their natural gas, if they even use certain things at all. They may simply turn around and say, I can't afford it, I have to really cut back. So I hope whatever we do with that, we think about it. Most of our residents are struggling. They don't have the income. And then the last question I have others, but that's for later. On the CFD, we're talking about in North Montclair. That CFD, I thought, just covered those units. I didn't know what, if I were to understand what this said, I didn't know that those units, or that these CFDs go for the whole city. I thought it was just for that area. Community Facilities District. It's not citywide, it's specific to a district.
Well, no, it could be applicable citywide. It is used primarily in North Montclair because that is where the high-density development projects are occurring. But if there were projects in other areas of the city and it was the intent to require that because of the size of the project, that there would be a responsibility related to providing additional police and fire and public works maintenance services to that area, then that would be imposed on those areas as well.
Because the way I read this, it looked as if these CFDs are being used to balance the budget in regard to police and fire services, and they really are applicable only to that area. If I were a resident there, I wouldn't want to know that I'm paying for something and it's being used somewhere else.
Yeah, well, they are used only for the area in which the CFD is paid for. So they do go into, obviously, their general fund dollars, but they're used specifically for the project that the money is derived from, and it is not used generally throughout the city.
That's all I have for now.
All right, Councilmember Mendez.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. On the cannabis business, the proposed tax rate of 7% that was authorized by the council, that's on top of the regular 9%, correct?
That would be on top of the Bradley Burns and the transactions use tax. That is correct.
Okay, so 16%. And then going down to the personnel choice services study implementation, I think that is a good idea. But obviously, it's not going to be used for basic questions or simple questions over the counter. These are more for developers or things that people need. I understand what these are. Yeah. And when it takes time out of one of our employees to pull reports or do things, I understand it. I mean, there has to be a cost for that. And I know it won't be outrageous, but I think it's definitely something that we should look into. And as Bill mentioned, as long as it doesn't, affect police and fire calls. On the, let's see here, the utility users tax, I know John just mentioned 5%, but is that what it is? The max could be is 5, or I thought it was
The
4
maximum authorized is, I believe, 4.74%,
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
which is
4.74.
considerably low when you compare it to what it is in other cities.
Yeah, and we're currently, right now, we're only charging 3 point something?
3.89%.
3.89, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
3.89.
That's my fault then. Okay.
No worries. So yeah, and obviously, we created that, the council created that at that time in 92, just to help the city when it needed help, and they reduced it when they could, and, and right now, we're having a little bit of trouble, so yeah, we may,
Can I talk about that for a second? I'm sorry.
oh, yeah, go ahead.
We can do this for one, if it's needed. I'm
Yeah,
not saying it's
If
needed
it's
right
needed,
now.
yeah,
We'll, next year, but if we do it, maybe we should do it for 1 year and then we reevaluate it again.
yeah.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, no, I understand. And then the consideration of bringing to the voters in 2028 to include cable and streaming services. I agree with that as far as the refuse and the sewer, because I know refuse isn't ours, but I feel like it comes through the city and it's almost like a city. I would say that we probably shouldn't include sewer and trash, but yes, definitely the cable and streaming services on that one. And as far as the Monte Vista Fire Protection District and pursuing cost reimbursement, how many years is it that they owe us for, that we never were paid?
Well, it's to our understanding that the payments to the city of Montclair, which were previously allocated to us through property tax revenues,
Yeah.
ceased in 2005 when LAFCO made a decision to eliminate the paper district. And, well, they interpreted that the Monte Vista Fire Protection District was a paper district. And it was LAFCO's desire to eliminate paper districts at that time. And so they did that. It was our understanding that while that occurred, the payment would continue to Montclair through property tax revenues. And earlier this year, we made the discovery that, in fact, the property tax revenues, which were very difficult to distinguish between what is coming from the city versus what is coming from the sphere of influence. So there's no clear indication of that tax flow. And then when I had asked for a audit to be conducted by finance, they made a determination that we were receiving minimal in property tax revenues from the sphere of influence, which opened our eyes to the fact that the county was not making the payment. And so we hired HDL to look at it, and HDL did make the determination that the county does owe the city a substantial amount of money. I say, or it is said in the presentation, that that amount needs to be determined. We project that it's probably in the neighborhood of $9.3 million. We will have to negotiate that with the county. The county will probably make an argument that we can only go back a number of years. Our argument would be that this is not a commercial debt. This is a service debt. We provided the services, you owe us for the services, and we're going to stand by that. Plus, the current year and all future years, including a CPI adjustment in future years. So we are seeking to set up a meeting with the county to have that conversation.
Okay, all right. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So now we will discuss personnel services. For fiscal year 2026-27, there are 205 full-time positions. The majority of that coming out of general fund, sewer fund, and grants, and then 0.24 of people are paid through the Montclair Successor Redevelopment Agency. There is one part-time benefited position. The employee has elected to remain in the part-time benefited position to maintain Social Security coverage, and the part-time benefited program will end upon employee separation from employment. The city's fiscal year 2026-27 proposed operating budget anticipates several adjustments to personnel classifications for some or all of the following reasons. Ensure the effective and efficient operation of city departments, provide for succession planning, ensure adequate staffing, promote personnel retention, achieve depth of experience, and ensure the provision of city services, address evolving needs and changes to organizational operations, respond to underperformance of sales and transaction and use tax earnings, respond to the availability or loss of grants, be responsive to potential shifts in the local economy due to the state of uncertainty regarding federal economic policies. Personnel modifications are submitted to the City Personnel Committee for consideration prior to implementation of classification modifications and/or the appointment of qualified and appropriate personnel. The fiscal year 2026-27 budget city manager recommendations. The city manager is not presently proposing any significant operational or personnel reorganization changes. The fiscal year 2026-27 budget does propose freezing 9 full-time and 7 part-time designated vacant positions. Each position is vacant for the following reasons. The position is vacant due to attrition. The position is vacant because it is an added extra position and remains vacant. The position remains vacant because no recruitment was conducted. The position is vacant because it is a proposed new position in the fiscal year 2026-27 budget, or the position remains vacant because the incumbent was promoted. The fiscal year 2026-27 proposed budget does not recommend that any active employee be subject to layoff, nor does the city manager project the need to meet with any bargaining groups to discuss layoff procedures. The City Council is advised that due to employee attrition and positioning by the MFFA bargaining group, city staff is in conversation with the San Bernardino County Fire Protection District regarding fire protection emergency services, a process that would result in transitional position layoffs. So here's a list of the frozen vacant positions. There are 5 departments involved, and it's saving just a little over $1 million with us freezing these positions. If not, our deficit would be over $1.6 million.
Let's stop there for a second. So I just, the last point then again is because these positions are frozen, if it wasn't frozen, you just said that the deficit would be $1.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
And just want to clarify that for the council. And then the bargaining negotiations, So if obviously we're still in labor negotiations, but if the council did approve any personnel adjustments in compensation, that could add on to the deficit?
That is correct. My anticipation is it could add $500,000 to $1 million to the deficit.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just want to backtrack to the sphere of influence issue, and I want to congratulate and thank our Fire Chief Ryan Derrick, who was instrumental in addressing this issue and working with city staff. He generated a significant amount of information related to this issue, and I do want to commend him for his effort in working with us to bring this issue to the forefront so that we could move forward in addressing this with the county.
And I'm sorry, the issue again is, I'm sorry.
Would be the sphere of influence issue, the issue related to providing fire protection services to
Right.
the sphere of influence to the former Monte Vista Fire Protection
Right.
District.
Okay. And going back to labor negotiations, we're still in labor negotiations, and obviously we're not going to talk about it here, but obviously you're working on it, we're in labor negotiations right now, but this makes the council aware that the deficit could be added based on how labor negotiations go. So
Yes, that is
probably
correct.
the best thing for us to do. We'll have that conversation in closed session during labor negotiations. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Yeah, could you explain transitional position layoffs? It's 37, very bottom.
All right, that issue is in relation again to the discussions with County Fire in the potential issue related to annexation into, or contracting with the County Fire Protection District. The County Fire would have to vet each one of the employees, and there is not always the possibility that every employee will be picked up. However, the general process in relation to annexation, not contracting, but at least in relation to annexation, is that employees are technically laid off and then hired back by County Fire Protection District.
And that's typically what would happen, assuming they pass all of their.
Yes, that is exactly what will happen. If the city ultimately had to make the decision that annexation was the only way to keep the fire department operating functionally, then that is what the county would require, is that in order for these employees to be picked up by the county, they have to be laid off by the city and then rehired by the county.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Mendez.
Yeah, just quick question. As far as full-time positions, I know for 22, 20, or 26, 27, we're saying 205 full-time positions, and that's minus the 9 full-time that are funded positions, but we're freezing those. So technically, we currently have 14 full-time positions. We're just not.
No, the 205 includes the 9 that are unfunded, because they're still in the budget, but they're
Yeah,
just
they're still
unfunded.
funded, yeah. Okay, so those are funded.
Okay.
And then, well, I just had one other thing, sorry. Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next section.
General Fund Special Purpose Funds. Special Purpose Funds established to address current and future liabilities, programs, projects, and goals requiring a commitment of funds not incorporated into the general fund operating budget. The CalPERS unanticipated normal cost retains $3.5 million for CalPERS and post-employment liabilities. Technology Enhancements Account retains $643,045 for technology acquisitions. The Self-Insurance Fund retains $1.6 million for city-related self-insurance retention liabilities. The Building Maintenance Fund retains $1.8 million for building maintenance. Unanticipated Personnel Adjustment Fund retains $1 million for unanticipated personnel-related expenditures. Equipment Replacement Fund retains, oops, we lost some numbers there, just a little over $1.2 million for equipment acquisitions. This reflects a reduction of $597,799 towards fiscal year 2026-27 capital outlay purchases. The OPEB retiree medical liability retains $2 million for other post-employment benefits. Contingency account retains $79,821 for unanticipated expenditures. The UAL POB amortization service fund is at $0 right now for unanticipated UAL charges. Parking facility development retains $9.5 million for parking facility development. Tariff recession inflation fiscal expenditure control fund retains $1 million for unanticipated cost increases. A-Line Betterment Fund retains $1.75 million for improvements to infrastructure for the A-Line light rail system at Monte Vista Avenue and the Montclair Trans Center. Street Maintenance Fund retains $1.25 million for street maintenance, and the Homelessness Advocacy Housing Outreach Assistant Fund retains $330,633 for homelessness aid. Total estimated all special purpose funds is $25.3 million. After proposed equipment replacement fund uses, will be our balance. Reminder, all major capital outlay will require approval from the city manager before purchase orders will be issued.
We'll stop there for a second. Did you have a question, Xavier?
Yeah, on that, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so on all these special funds, that these monies are obviously almost like a reserve, Ed, technically?
Well, they are, yes, in the reserve fund, yes, they are designated for special purposes and can
Yeah.
only be used for those special purposes.
And they can only be used for those?
Unless the council redirects that they be redirected, yes.
Because it's general fund money, correct?
Yes.
And then does that include the 3 lease revenue bond amounts that are left?
No, those monies are allocated separately so that they are committed to those funds specifically and have no bearing on other general fund operations.
Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, and just on this, I know the parking facility development, the $9.6 million, and we were looking at using some of this money for real estate transaction or purchase, and those deals have fallen apart. So we still have this $9.6 million. Am I correct, Ed?
That is correct. I wouldn't say that the deals have fallen apart. It's just that
As of right now, those
yes,
deals are.
the owners have asked for more money than the city is
Okay.
willing to pay.
All right. So that potentially could drop depending on those real estate deals if we decide to purchase those properties.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
and
that is
as far as
correct.
to answer my questions, my colleagues' questions, on the reserves, yeah, our undesignated reserves is what, 14 point something in this budget? What is it, Janet? What we have, 14 point something
The
percent?
undesignated reserve?
Are you talking about special purpose funds?
No,
The unassigned reserve is
unassigned
5.4
reserve.
million.
Thank you.
5.4 million.
Yeah,
Which is about 14 point,
13.4.
yeah, 13.4.
13.14%.
However, if we take this amount, the 25 million, this gets us up to like 66, 67%. And again, this is if, things get pretty dramatic in the fiscal year, and so we have these funds for cash flow purposes and give us the time to figure out what we're gonna do, so.
Yes, so just to give you an example, you talk about the UAL, the allocation for OPEBs. The GOF prefers that cities commit funding into trust funds. And in our case, the cost to pay for our OPEBs, our other post-employment benefits, would be about $9.5 million. And GOAF would want us to put $9.5 million in trust funds. That money is restricted and it can only be used for paying off OPEBs. We use a pay-as-you-go system, but in allocating money to the special purpose fund that we have here, in our opinion, and the way that it appears to be working, is that that money is separately designated for OPEDs in the event that we need to draw on that because of an increase in OPEBs. We believe that our process has effectively worked because if you recall, back in the early 2000s, there was a workshop presentation to the City Council by an auditor who projected that Montclair's OPEBs would be around $12.5 million and continue to increase. But the city has effectively controlled the cost of other post-employment benefits And in fact, our costs to OPEB have declined from that $12.5 million at that time to $9.4 million now. And so having put this money in a trust and restricting it only for that and not having it available to the city for other purposes would not have been to the best interest of the community. And so I believe that our process has paid off, and we continue to see that OPEB come down through our controlling mechanisms.
At any budget, you, in your very long budget message, you talked about the risk factor. I think the controller's department, state controller, did one about 5 or 6 years ago, and staff went back. And so, what is the health of our budget based on the controller's office method?
Right, so I believe that the health of the city's budget has improved significantly since then, in large part to Measure L, but also again, as I indicated in relation to the OPEB, before where we have received maybe a high risk factor in that area because of the amount of our OPEB, but because we control it, and the OPEB has actually come down to $9.4 million. I would rate us, as I do in that graph, at moderate. And so while we have seen some increases back up from last year, primarily because of the downturn in the economy overall, I would still say that Montclair is between low and moderate in our risk.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on.
So our 2014 issue of lease revenue bonds, payment period fiscal year 2014 to 2045. So the issue amount for this bond was $45 million. The purpose was to defease balance of the 2005 issue, which was used for police facility and youth and senior center projects, approximately $22 million for public works infrastructure projects. The 2014 issue of lease revenue bond funds have been exhausted. Annual debt service, approximately $2.6 million through fiscal year 2044-45. Funding source for annual debt service is the general fund revenue, and for fiscal year 2026-27, the payment will be $2,597,163. The 2021 issue of lease revenue bonds, payment period fiscal year 2022 to 2051. The issue amount for this bond was $45 million. The purpose, complete infrastructure improvement projects throughout the city. Remaining balance, approximately $20 million, retained to primarily function as a matching source for grants. Annual debt service, approximately $2.4 million through fiscal year 2050-51. Funding source for annual debt service is general fund revenue. Payment for fiscal year 2026-27 is $2,396,313. Our 2021 issue of pension obligation bonds, payment period fiscal year 2021 to 2041. The issue amount of this bond was $62.1 million. The purpose, transfer debt from the city's California Public Employees Pension System, unfunded accrued liability account to the pension obligation bond. Annual debt service, approximately $4.4 million through fiscal year 2040-41. Funding source for annual debt service is the general fund. The payment for 2026-27 is $4,434,713.
Okay, we'll stop there for a second. Councilmember Mendez.
Yeah, so my questions on these, obviously, two of them have zero balances. One has a $20 million balance. Do we collect interest on that, correct?
Yeah, yes, we do, but we are prohibited from collecting excessive interest, and any interest rate above or any interest accrual above a certain amount, we have to return to the bond agencies.
Like what type of percentage is that? Is it like a 3% interest rate or?
I believe it's above the bond rate itself.
Yeah. So anything above that, we're not allowed to keep. So, for example, I believe maybe last year, we probably made around $4 million in interest and had to return $3 million because we're not allowed to hold it. You are not, by arbitration laws, you are not allowed to make income off of borrowed funds.
And that money that you gotta pay back doesn't reduce our balance, correct?
Well, it doesn't reduce the whole balance, no, that we originally borrowed. That is correct. Only the interest amount.
Yeah.
And then as far as, the rates that we're paying, are they fixed rates or are
The
they?
the debt service payment, it varies every year, but very minimally, maybe, a couple $1,000s.
So,
Right.
Yeah, and I think actually on one of the previous slides, the debt service payments went up like $1,817 for next fiscal year. So it just kind of fluctuates up and down just a little bit.
but is there like a limit that, I mean, obviously it's probably written somewhere where it
Oh,
says
yeah,
a
in all the
max.
bond documents, each year it tells me how much we need to pay.
I mean, but is there like a max, like it cannot go over 1%, increase annually or?
No, I mean, it's
no.
already, when we get the bonds, it's already laid out for the entire.
Yeah.
Right.
So once it's set in those bond documents, it doesn't
Oh, okay.
change.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a surprise. We know each year what to plan for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we receive depending on the payback period, 30 years, 40 years, we know what each annual payment will be.
Mhm.
Somewhat fixed with a little bit of adjustment. Okay. And, that's all I have right now on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna, on 47, the $20 million, obviously that's money to do projects, to do capital improvement projects. Are we getting close to do some projects, Ed? Or I know we've got street projects, I know we talked about Saratoga Park.
We have a significant number of projects that are being prepared for moving forward. Some of them just require some additional funding, and we're hoping for grants for that purpose. We have a number of grants that are outstanding, and we are just waiting to receive information as to whether or not we are successful on those grants. But every month, we meet with our grant advisor, in this case Alyssa Kalunga, and Blaze to go over potential grants that we can additionally apply for.
Okay.
So the city has a significant number of grants currently in play, ready to be spent, as well as ones that we are applying for.
And I assume a lot of the projects, the planning stage is, the design stage is either in design or almost completed, or design completed, close to where we can go out and do bids on some of these
Right.
projects.
Well, it depends on the grant. Some of them require that you be shovel-ready.
Right.
And we do strive to be shovel-ready with every project that we have. Others simply require that we're only paying for engineering services or for studies related to doing the project, and others are for the construction. So it just depends on
Okay.
it depends on the project, it depends on the grant.
All right, let's talk about pension real fast. So we did this back in 21, 22, whenever it was. Back then, we were dishing out, what, 5 million, 5 point something million a year at that time. We did the bonds, we got it down to 4.4, we came up with the policy. The difference is we'll go into the special purpose fund. However, the last 2 years, we've been hit with an additional unfunded liability, this year being, what, 3.5 million, last year being 2 point something million. Of course, the year before, it was 0. So basically, versus 2 years ago, we're now dishing out an additional 3.5 million for pension that could be used for other things in the city, including salary increases, adjustments. So, Ed, I know we talked about this, but maybe for the council's education, where do you think this is going? I know there's been improvement in the stock market for CalPERS, but can you kind of, educate us a little bit on this?
Right, so this year, or at least next year, the estimated UAL will be about $3.8 million, as you indicated. However, CalPERS did perform quite well last year. They came in at 11.1%, which is above their 6.8% on their standard residual. And so we believe that if end of year 2026, so June 30, 2026, if CalPERS demonstrates another positive year performance, their board will meet, and we expect that $3.8 million will be reduced. I don't know the amount, but I'm hoping that it will come closer to the $3 million range. However, I do want to point out that had we not done the bond back when we did, That $5.5 million payment that we were making then would probably be closer to a $9 million payment right now. So even though the UAL is up to the $3.8 million, if we pay that off, it takes us back to a zero. It's to our interest to pay it back, pay it off every year, so we don't accrue the 7% interest that CalPERS applies. That is our objective. We've been able to do that, but do keep it in perspective that if we did not do that, even if you add that $3.8 million onto the $4.5 million payment that we are making based on the terms of the bond, if we did not do that, we would be paying up to $9 million to CalPERS annually at this point anyway, and that number would continue to increase. My estimation, at least through 2030, if not beyond.
Yeah, and that's, that's, well, if you take the 4.4 we're paying now plus the 3.8, that puts us in the, about 20% of our general fund is just going to pay off CalPERS.
Yeah,
Add
it's a significant share.
Another 1.4 million on top of that, then we're getting closer to 25% of our general fund. So,
Yes.
It's disturbing. I don't say it's disturbing, it's just, that's the reality. And, this is something we've been dealing with for the last 15 years. We thought when we got to 21, we'll be in good shape, and now here is the 3.3 or $3.8 million surprise we're dealing with. But I'll move on, and we'll go on to the conclusion.
Okay. The fiscal year 2026-27 general fund operating budget. As presented to the City Council for consideration, the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 budget reflects a shortfall in revenues versus appropriations of $631,544. The deficit is resolved by the proposed transfer of $631,544 from the unassigned general fund reserve to produce a balanced budget. For fiscal year 2026-27, each city department was provided flexibility in the preparation of their respective budget programs. However, after budgets were submitted, it was necessary for the city manager to reduce department budget requests by $3.9 million across all funds and $3.6 million in relation to the general fund. Reductions were made using historical data, expenditure details, actual and projected needs, and available funding. The city manager directed the freezing of vacant positions in various departments, saving just over $1 million in wage and benefit costs. Without this action, the deficit would have grown to $1,673,194. The estimated deficit for fiscal year 2026-27 may be adjusted due to the potential for added personnel costs as the city has yet to complete labor negotiations with bargaining groups. Until negotiations are completed, the estimated additional budgetary impact remains unknown. With strategies proposed in this budget message, coupled with anticipated long-term improvements in the economy, the city manager anticipates the deficit will remain limited in its scope and not extend to future fiscal years. Montclair's deficit is manageable and does not represent a structural problem. The fiscal year 2026-27 proposed budget incorporates the following debt service funds. The 2014 issue of lease revenue bonds debt service fund, $2,597,163. The 2021 issue of lease revenue bonds debt service funds, just over $2.3 million. And the 2021 issue of pension obligation bonds debt service fund, $4.4 million. The passage of Measure L in 2020 greatly improved the city's revenue profile. However, sales and transaction and use tax receipts are underperforming, and both Measure L and Measure F have become fully integrated into the city's operational profile, and the revenue generated is necessary to meet ongoing obligations without excess revenue available to enhance the unassigned and special purpose general fund reserve capacity. Going forward, city staff will routinely look at fresh approaches for service delivery, continue to evaluate grants and outside funding opportunities, seek to develop strategies to improve both the appearance and infrastructure of the community, promote new revenue concepts, pursue development of the city's commercial and residential base, promote economic development opportunities by drawing on the city's past and effective promotion of redevelopment, continue to develop the partnerships for investments not only in North Montclair, but throughout the city, and work with regional, state, and federal representatives to promote efforts designed to move Montclair forward. And that is the end of the presentation for the city.
Okay, any questions for city staff on this? No? Councilman Rue?
First, I want to thank staff for all of their hard work on this. It is not always easy to do this, but I think they've done a commendable job. I have a couple of questions on things, more related to revenue than anything else. I'm looking at globally the need to pull in more revenue. One of the things I wonder if we could do, and I know I'll get beaten up for saying this, so I'm already aware of it, what we can do to bring in more gasoline stations. They provide a tremendous amount of revenue. The more we have in here, people will get off the freeway or as they commute through town, purchase gasoline, and that's a revenue source for us. Electric charging stations are wonderful, and I'm not saying not to have them. They're great. But they don't provide the revenue that a gasoline station does. Is there something we can do to try to get more gas stations here? Because I go back to, the days of the Montclair, heyday of the Montclair Plaza. There were gas stations everywhere up there. And I'm wondering if there's something we can do along those lines, because that is a great source of revenue. I realize cars are more fuel efficient, so they're using, not as much gas, but we could still get revenue from it. Is there any thought about that?
Well, yes. In fact, right now, Costco is expanding their bays from 8 bays to 16 bays. If you go to Costco, you'll see that the construction is ongoing. It's a little bit problematic, and we probably will experience some revenue loss because of the difficulty in getting in and out of Costco, but hopefully within the next 4 months, they'll complete the project, and that will double the bays from, again, 8 to 16. Costco also expressed interest in developing an off-site gas facility in Montclair. We don't know the status of that right now. We've given them a number of locations, and they are still weighing whether or not that will be something that they would want to do in Montclair. Other gas stations, no, there hasn't been much interest in developing additional gas stations in Montclair, but Costco is the leader, and generating more facilities through Costco certainly is to our interest. At the same time, Montclair Place has toyed with the idea of bringing a Sam's Club to the site, and that would generate additional gas station facilities if CIM did ultimately go that direction.
I'm glad to hear that, because that's a great source of revenue. And again, I'm not opposed to electric charging stations.
Unless that's changed.
Keep in mind, though, that when it comes to gas, the gas tax revenue generated by gasoline stations can only be used for transportation.
Right.
Infrastructure projects is not available for general fund operations.
Right, but that would be a great use for them for our roads. Repairs on that would be great. What we need to do, maybe we could be the leader in bringing in gasoline sales tax revenue. And again, before anybody beats me up, I'm not opposed to electric charging stations. I think they're important. It's another option, but they don't bring in the revenue that a gas station does. Another question I have. I listened at a prior meeting where we talked about believing in the free market, which I certainly do, and that we need to be free market on certain things. I would hope that it would include all businesses. Business, let's say, donut shop wants to locate in Montclair. We shouldn't be turning them down. We should be doing everything we can to get them in. Do they generate a lot of sales tax? No. I believe it's only on dine-in, if I'm correct. But that's still some revenue. Maybe if they generate 15,000 a year in sales tax, I don't know what they generate, that would cover the cost of the office furniture we're buying for the MAP program. I hope we get to the point of being more pro-business. There's a business that wants to be here. Let's see what we need to do to bring them in. Donut shops are not a bad thing. Other types of stores are not a bad thing. Retail is declining, so we need to figure out what we do to supplant the retail with something else. And I hope we would start to look at that. It distresses me when I hear, oh, well, I don't think people would have wanted that. What's wrong with bringing in sources of revenue? We need to really be serious about that. And I think the last thing I want to look at is, I concur with a comment made at the first part of the meeting by Councilmember Mendez about we're cutting, but we're increasing the budget in other areas. I understand that, but somebody at home who's sitting there, they're not going to be able to do that with their private budget. They're going to just have to cut. And so I don't understand the expanding or increasing at a time when it's bad. I don't know if the economy is going to recover next year or not. I can't predict that. But even if it does, if we can set a base and start putting then more money away, that would be good. Thank you.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, the increase in revenues is primarily related to grants and other revenues that come to the city specifically for those projects. So either we spend the money on those projects or we don't get the grant money. It isn't that the city is securing new monies through the general fund and we're not spending them on personnel or other services. These are typically grants or one-time monies that are designed for specific purposes, like, for example, SB 509, which is designed for public safety. We have to spend those monies or we continue to accrue them, but we can't spend them on other sources. We can only spend them on those purposes. So as long as that revenue comes in and it's available for us to spend, and while it looks like the budget is increasing because of those revenues, keep in mind that it is the general fund that really is the key to the operations of the city as far as personnel and the general services that we deliver to the communities. Other dollars that make it appear that the budget is growing, despite the fact that we project a deficit, those dollars are either spent on those specific requirements that the funding sources tell us that we can spend them on, or we don't spend them at all, or we don't apply for those funds, in which case, then you're right, you wouldn't see the growth, but you wouldn't also see the type of development activity that is occurring in the Montclair, despite the fact that the general fund may not be performing to the level that it is.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Thank you. Once again, I appreciate the transparency in the report and the numbers, and even though this is not ideal revenue-wise, I want to say thank you for the creativity and the efforts with the grants, and just putting it all out there for us, for our consideration. I think we are a good-looking city. I think we take a lot of care of our residents and of our city, and our city staff, and I like to see that continue happening. But for what we're dealing with, this is, once again, fantastic, and thank you for the effort in putting this together for us.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
All right, first of all, just to piggyback on what Chris was just saying, yes, I appreciate everything that you guys go through. I know that Mr. Ed over here is probably the mastermind to most of these things because I see him here all the time. And I do appreciate him answering lots of my questions at personal times when no one else is around. It's nice to be able to have somebody that's available like that. But I do continue to have questions relating to things. One, I would definitely love to see a salary survey done with all of our local surrounding cities, just to see where our employees are, so we can see and include health benefits with that also. I know I may have to pay a fee to get the employees to do that, you know, if we have that new rule come in, but I'll be willing to pay for that. That's a joke. People are supposed to laugh, John. Yeah. So,
That was you personally will be willing to pay.
yeah,
Is
that's
that how I
what I'm
understood
saying.
that?
That new fee that we
You
have.
got three paychecks. You got a pension
Yeah.
paycheck, you got your web paycheck, you
Yeah.
got city council's paycheck. You can afford it.
Yeah, I'll pay for that, for sure. But I just want to make sure that, I want to see where our shortfalls are and, and try to focus maybe on that in the next years or so to try to get those divisions or departments back up to where they should be. As far as, as I mentioned earlier about the monies, I understand a lot of the funds and I understand a lot of, how these work. I was privy to be able to create my own budgets for years, and but there's still so much that I don't know. And I would love to see us have another workshop to allow us a little bit more time to learn more about these special funds, payments, everything that we can learn. I would personally appreciate it. I'm not saying everybody has to attend it, but I would be willing to attend something, or if there's a class that I could take, I would definitely take that. But I noticed, going through all the different departments that, some of them had increases, including the city council budget. And I was just wondering, who's the one that actually writes that up? Because it shows that we were requesting an additional, more money than we asked. And I don't remember ever telling anybody, so I just don't know who's the one that creates it. I'm assuming it's Ed. But ours went up $20,000. City manager, your department went up $180,000. Admin services, $92,000. Human services, $338,000. But which now I know is part of the after-school program. Is that a grant also that we received? That 300?
Yes.
So wonderful. See, and I would love, that is important for us to know, because then it doesn't look like, oh, we're just spending more money in human services. And, because then you go down to the police and, sorry, poor police, you're reducing by 450,000, on what you requested and what you received. Fire, you guys increased 2.3 million almost, but I understand why. The grant, the fire truck, I get it. I understand those things, but having the understanding of those just helps me, and I think it would help the residents. Not that we have any residents here right now to ask, but it's important.
Well, I think if I may, the easy answer to a lot of your questions just then are that a lot of costs are driven by contract, and contracts have annual CPI adjustments associated with them. We have no control over that.
Yep.
And so some budgets rise. So for example, when you're talking about the city manager's budget, that budget incorporates refuse services. And refuse services change significantly by hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. We have to pay that, but at the same time, that goes to the increase in the revenue that you see and speak about.
Yeah.
So if the cost of providing refuse services increases by $100,000 a year, it's also offset by $100,000 in revenue. But the budget still has to demonstrate that there's an appropriation increase of $100,000, but the revenue budget will also show an increase in $100,000 to offset that.
Yeah.
But that's how most of those budgets are driven as far as cost increases, contracts that commit us to those adjustments.
Yes, and thank you for that. And that comes to my last department, which isn't a very old, I don't think you've had this one in there that long. I mean, probably 10 years or more. Citywide, that department, it increased by $1.175 million. And just maybe you could give me a little bit more education on why that one went up so
Sure,
much.
an easy answer on that is worker compensation claims filed against the city, lawsuits filed against the city, the cost of electricity, the cost of telephone services. So everything that goes into the citywide budget are those cost components that are shared throughout the organization. CalPERS costs
Yep,
are
unfunded
in there. So as the
liability.
mayor pointed out earlier, ULA increases in the normal service cost range. Those are no longer part of individual individual budgets. for departments, that's all now incorporated into citywide because collectively, we all have to pay for those costs. They're not unique to the police, they're not unique to human services, they are common to the entire organization. And citywide, in fact, is where the bulk of the cost increases impact us because insurance is skyrocketing. Worker comp claims are based on the number of claims filed by employees in the organization, and lawsuits based on whoever's filing a lawsuit. And of course, we have no control over the cost of electricity, water, postage, and other utilities, and all that is reflected in citywide.
Okay, so I understand that, and thank you for that definition. The 1.175 million increase, but I know that we also mentioned that this is where we get the unfunded balance also of PERS, which increased by 3.8 million.
Well, it didn't increase by 3.8 million.
Oh, it
That's,
didn't?
it's up
Oh,
to
it's-
that, but it didn't increase by that
Oh,
amount.
what was it last year? Do we know?
Not off the top of my head, I don't, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right, well, again, so this leads to my final question or request. And I talked a little bit to John about it just a little bit ago, but I would really, and I know staff may be upset with me again doing this, but I would love to receive this budget a minimum of 4 to 8 weeks before.
No.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at every city
got
in
it.
California, it's 4 to 8 weeks, and that's the average. When we are given a 778-page document to review, and then for us to sit up here and vote on, I just don't feel like it's enough time for me to give the best answer to the people that put us in here. And I know you laughed just now at it.
No, I understand what you're saying, but it's a,
I
it's
get
a
it.
huge process.
I know, I
and
was involved with it, I understand.
Not like,
I understand.
we are.
I understand, but that's your position, that's your job.
yeah.
And I just would love to see us, get this, like I said, 4 weeks in advance, rather than 1 week in advance. Just because, like I said, 778 pages to review this, and then all these other supplements that we get, it's a lot. And I really try to go through it. And like I said, if I could even have a class where I can understand it better, I'm not trying to be you, I'm not trying to be Ed, I'm just trying to make the best decision I can for the residents in the community. That's all I want to do.
Well,
Understood.
if I
And
can-
if I may, Mr. Mayor, before you comment, the only way that we could achieve this is one of two ways, and that is that we start the budget process before the new calendar year even begins, which is, I think, a significant burden on the departments because they don't really understand necessarily where their expenditures are yet. And the other issue is that there is no provision in law that you adopt a budget by June the 30th. As I put in the budget at the very beginning, the discussion of what a budget is. And that is to demonstrate to you that we're not required to adopt a budget. But if we don't, we run into a number of complications. And so we can bring the budget to you even in July for your consideration. But you have to understand, we have no authorization to spend money until you do, in fact, give us that authorization. So those are the only two options that are available to us. We start the process significantly earlier, or you adopt the budget later in the year.
Well, let me interject here. First, you can do a continuing resolution to the next fiscal year too. You just continue the existing budget to the new fiscal year, and then you can adopt the budget later on. That's what we're doing at Metrolink. We're extending that budget for 3 months because obviously revenues for Metrolink have dropped and trying to figure out how to do service levels. But I think the answer to the first question is, 4 weeks is kind of way in advance, putting this budget. I think what needs to happen is, we should have this budget at least 2 weeks before this meeting, at least 2 weeks. And I think that during that period of time, there should be some type of this is a workshop, but a study workshop for the council members, not in this environment, perhaps at the library or in the conference room where council members can just ask questions to staff and dig into it before this meeting takes place. I don't know, that could be the study session, maybe call it study session. Doesn't mean all the council members can come, it'll be a Brown Act meeting, we meet the Brown Act, but it's optional if council members want to attend the study session and they can ask a lot of questions. Maybe another thing needs to happen for this budget, if Councilmember Mendez wants this, and then if there's interest, maybe there should be a study session on the budget this summer or this fall, and again, it's held someplace else, and council members can ask a lot of questions, dive into the budget with staff. I will recommend that, and maybe that's the best way to get the education.
Okay, and that's fine, but I'm letting you know that your budget message will be 10 to 20 pages. It will not be the 120 pages
No.
that you get now. I'm letting you know, you will not be getting a 120 page budget message that explains to you everything that's going on. You will be getting what every other city provides their city council, and that's a 10-page budget
Yeah,
message.
okay, let's not get excited here, okay? What I'm trying to say here is, I understand among council, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I kind of breeze this kind of like, budget. I look for certain things, have a pretty good understanding about the budget. I come in, talk to staff about it, and make sure I understand what's in the budget before today's meeting. Yes, Ed, you're correct, because I don't know how many cities' budgets I go through, and I look at the budget message, and it's crap, there's nothing there, so I don't understand what's in the budget. What I'm saying here is, for the education of at least Councilmember Mendez, somebody else, perhaps Councilmember Mendez, if nobody else is interested, maybe you want to have a meeting with staff, conference room, the theater room, and gives you an opportunity to go through this current budget that's hopefully was adopted tonight, and then you get a better understanding of that budget here. And maybe next year, when we have the budget session, we kind of do the same thing at a study session before this meeting, and council members can engage it with staff and answer a lot of their questions. I understand when you get here, this is a little more formal. I've always encouraged my council colleagues to try to meet with staff and ahead of time on some of the bigger issues, so you get your questions out of the way. But perhaps there's a formal setting where we have a study session, and again, that's volunteer, which councilors want to show up, and then be under the Brown Act, and then you can ask a lot of questions in that format. So I don't know if that's something that Councilman Mendez is kind of asking for.
I'm actually
or as a
open to-
resolution.
I'm open to anything,
Okay.
I'm,
All right.
I
So-
won't apologize for upsetting anybody here, but I wasn't,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm asking for anything that's out of the question.
Well, I think it's important to council members to be educated. The budget is a hard one to understand. But it's important to council members to be educated and when they vote and what they're voting on. So yes, so perhaps staff, Ed, or council, I don't know if anybody else interested, Councilmember Rue, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
I just feel, to be honest, like, Ed, if I was you and I wrote this budget like you do, I would want more people to read it and understand it and enjoy it. I mean, it's a major document, and yes, it's something that I would like to understand. So
All right, so maybe it sounds like, I don't need a study session, but if you like to have I'll be happy to participate in a study session, I should say. But if you like to have a study session, then perhaps staff can at least contact you, schedule one, and it gives you a chance, at least go through this budget, and you have a better understanding. So when we prepare for next year's budget, perhaps some of the things in next year's proposed budget, you'll have understanding why it's there ahead of time, okay? And then maybe next year, we'll try to get the budget out 2 weeks in advance, and then, again, maybe a study session if council members want to meet with staff, and then ask questions on the budget in that format, which is kind of informal as opposed to in this format.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, we do always try to have the budget to you at least 2 weeks in advance. You have to keep in mind that this particular year, we had a lawsuit that staff was preparing for. We had a number of other issues that staff was working on, and the budget was just in the middle of all of that. And I agree, and I even had this conversation with Janet, and she will agree that I was concerned that it was not getting to you at least the 2 weeks in advance. We did get it to you a week and a half, and I apologize for that. But even to have this budget session, we're still gonna have to have the budget done for you, even in a budget session, which does not remove the responsibility from us of starting the process earlier. It's the only way that this is going to happen.
Yeah, so I think right now, let's just shoot for the 2 weeks with the idea if we'll invite the council members, they want to come to a special session and just learn about it before we actually have this workshop here. Maybe that's the format for the next year format. I know that Councilman Mendez, you talked about salary survey, you brought that up. I think we need to do is go through the negotiations first, maybe, you know, Ed, I don't know if you want to opine on it, on this one here, I'm not sure exactly, I mean,
I'm sorry, what?
opine on the salary survey that was brought up by Councilman Mendez. I think first of all, we need to go through we need to get through the council, we need to get through negotiations. Perhaps this is an item we should be discussing in closed session as well. I'm assuming if we want to do a salary survey,
Yeah.
this should be discussed in closed session, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I agree. We're in the middle of labor negotiations, and to
Okay.
talk about a salary survey would send out false encouragement to the labor groups that the city is looking at something it's
So,
not going to be
This
doing.
is not the time to do a salary survey. However, we will have we'll have a closed session and next meeting, talk about bargaining unit negotiations, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and that's fine, but I brought this up last year, the salary survey, and it never happened. So I'm just wanting it to happen is all I'm asking.
Well, I think right now, this
Yeah.
is an issue we should not be talking about up here. This is
Yeah,
more of a closed
no,
session
I
item,
understand what you're saying about the
and I think we should
negotiation.
discuss this in closed session.
Yeah, so two things. One, we do salary surveys all the time. The labor groups themselves do salary surveys all the time. If the council wants to do a council-directed salary survey, it would require that we contract that out. And last time we did a contracted out salary survey, it costs a significant amount of money, and we can do that if you want us to bring it back before the council. And the reason why I say this is that we do not necessarily accept the salary surveys conducted by the bargaining groups because we don't know the positions that they're surveying, and they don't like the surveys that we conduct because we look at positions and try to do a like-for-like match, and there's always disagreement. So the only way that there is a amicable solution to these sorts of surveys is that there is an independent third party that conducts the surveys, and that does cost money.
And I understand that, but honestly, I could do my own salary survey if that's
Well,
what's needed. But, and I get it,
Well,
but
again, I
it's
just-
not something I'm asking for that
Yeah.
all this information isn't readily available to contact each city and get it. And I'm just talking about the salary city or the surveys that cities that we used in the past because they're similar to
Well-
ours. And that's it. And then regarding the 2 weeks, like Ed mentioned, he already shoots for 2 weeks every time. So maybe 3 weeks. I don't know. I just want to see something to where we have some time.
Okay, we hear your message, and we'll try to work towards that.
And as far
Thank you,
as,
Ed.
again, as far as the salary survey, let's discuss that in closed session.
Okay.
And then I know on the citywide cost, I just want to say this, I saw this somewhere in your report. Our litigation costs and workers' comp costs, and not just us, it's other cities too, is out of control. It's gone up wacko by numbers. It's pretty amazing.
They have increased significantly, and they're expected to increase even more significantly next year. And we will be bringing a request to the city council to support documentation related to encouraging the legislature to address the cost of insurance, particularly as it relates to how municipal agencies, when they are found 1% responsible, they're fully responsible for 100% of the cost of lawsuits. This has to end. We are the deep pocket, and everybody looks to us, and it's just a burden that we can't continue.
I agree. And I just want to, you have a paragraph in here on page 51 of the slide. So I think this puts at ease where we are right now with this deficit. It says, with strategies proposed in this budget message, coupled with the anticipated long-term improvements in the economy, the city manager anticipates the deficit will remain limited in its scope and not extend to future fiscal years. Montclair deficit is manageable and does not represent a structural problem. I think that's important right there. The fire alarms are not going off right now. I think we're doing a better job than the state of California is, or maybe some big city in LA is doing on their deficit, in my opinion. I think we are acting as though what Montclair households would do and manage their money, manage their expenses based on current economic times. So I think we're in much better shape. So I do want to say this. I appreciate staff, all the hard work from staff on this. I know we have the Housing Corporation, so let's do the Housing Corporation.
Mr. Mayor, I know I'm not a member of the council, but I do need to exercise a point of privilege. If you can give us a few-minute break, please.
Oh, you can have a break. That's fine. Actually, I need a break anyway, so, all right, break time. Okay, we're back. Let's do Housing Corporation real fast.
Yes, this will be quick. Montclair Housing Corporation proposed budget for fiscal year 2026-27. So the Montclair Housing Corporation, list of Montclair Housing Corporation properties contained in the Montclair Housing Corporation budget. Estimated fund balance at July 1, 2026 is $879,879. The estimated revenue, rental income, 1.77 million, income, $18,000, for a total of just over $2.6 million. Positions previously funded by the Housing Corporation are now fully funded by the general fund, an action that reserves Housing Corporation funding for maintenance and expansion of the city's affordable housing program. So the estimated fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2026-27 is $1,284,935 after we have $1,389,400 in expenses. And that's the end of the presentation.
Any questions on the housing stuff? Councilman Rue?
Do we own our properties debt-free?
Yes.
All properties are owned debt-free.
So, Ms. Colbeck, it is debt-free?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't make any, we bought them outright. We don't make monthly payments or anything on
Because I
them.
was wondering what the interest would have been on these, so I don't need to ask that question. Thank you.
You own how many units again? 104, 108? What was it?
No, we're probably up somewhere in the neighborhood of 110 now.
Yeah, and so I think a couple of years ago, I tried to figure out the average, we take the rental income divided by the number of units we own. I think it was coming out like $700 a month per unit, something like that, or 800 or something like that.
Well, it depends, but there are adjustments periodically,
So
not
this
very
was all
rarely.
market rate. We'll probably get triple the income, I suspect, so.
Yes, but to be clear, they're not market rate.
I know, I understand. Okay.
had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Mendez.
Yeah, so all of these are debt-free, but all of these units are all, have liens on them, correct, for the lease revenue bonds, though?
They have liens, but not all of them, no. Some of them have been acquired recently. Well, no, in fact, Housing Corporation properties don't have liens on them, I'm sorry. These are debt-free, they have no liens on them. It's only other city properties that the city owns as operational facilities.
Right.
All right, thank you. That's good news.
Well, let me ask I got a question to ask. Mikey's not here, I know that, but the question is, if we were to sell.
He's online.
I mean, Mike can answer the question. I'm trying to remember my days of redevelopment. If we were to sell these properties, could we sell them for market rate, or do we have covenants on them that prevents the affordability remains? And I thought some of the stuff we bought was general fund money, but is there a question?
Well, the massive majority of the properties were bought with
Redevelopment money.
20% set aside
Right.
from the former redevelopment agency, and they do have covenants on them.
Yeah, those have covenants, but we also bought property here recently,
Anything bought after 2012 is not with, well, they do have covenants on them, but they are not bought with monies that are subject to restrictions. We do have the $3.3 million that we received from relation to the mobile home park issue that we resolved several
Right.
months ago.
Right.
That money would have restrictions for affordable housing, but the monies that the Economic Development Agency has spent since 2012 generally does not have those kind of
The
restrictions.
monies that they've spent to purchase these residential homes are not subject to affordability.
Well,
Yeah,
again, the
Mr. Mayor
bulk of
and
them
City
are.
Council, so the properties that were purchased with the former redevelopment agency, those properties, if we would sell them off, we would then have to use the proceeds of
Right.
those funds to put back into the low and moderate fund category that we have. We wouldn't be able to sell them. We wouldn't be able to use the money for anything else. The money that was the properties that were purchased with the Economic Development Agency funds, those do not have any restrictions. So
right.
we would then be able to
Yeah.
use the proceeds from those funds. It's only the ones that were used from the former redevelopment agencies that would then require to be
That
reused
makes
for low and
sense.
moderate.
That makes sense. Thank you, Mikey. Okay, so now we have consent calendar. We have 4 items of consent calendar, including the adoption of the city's budget and the housing corporation's budget. If there's no questions on it, can I get a motion?
I'll move for approval of the
Move,
budget.
move approval of consent calendar. Can I get a second? Second by Councilmember Mendez.
Are we
Let's-
going to vote on item 4? Or are we
Yeah.
taking 4 and 5 together?
We're doing consent calendar now, which is A, B, C, and D.
Right, but what about item 4, the budget?
Item 4, the budget, that's presentation. The budget now is under consent calendar. It will be item C. 5C is the City of Montclair budget, and 5D is the Housing Authority budget. Okay, so we have a motion. Let's vote. Great. Oh. All right, that's adopted 4-0. Again, staff, thank you very much for the hard work, and we're adjourned.